Now that we have our AWS account set up, if you're logging in for the first time, yours may look a little different. And you recently visited, mine is a little more busy since I've been using quite a few services. But these are some widgets that you can remove and add. There is pretty limited flexibility to customization, but you do have some customization. If there's a widget that you need, you can go ahead and add that right there. If you're just getting started with AWS, you'll find yourself searching for your most common services. One thing I like to do is just to hit that star button and you get them pinned across here. And as you start using more and more services, this list will get populated. One thing I like to do for all my AWS account is set a budget. Even though we'll be using primarily serverless services, which comes with pretty generous free tier, you probably won't be brushing the surface of the free tier for most of the stuff we'll be building. But it's just a good practice. So if I go to services and if you type budget and just open AWS budget and go to create budget, and let's go to monthly cost budget. And you just give this a name, maybe serverless apps, whatever you want to call it, and set a budget, maybe $5, $10, depending. And if you type in a email address and it create budget, whenever you reach 85% of your actual spend for the month, AWS will send you an email just reminding you. So it's a good way just to keep an eye on your spend, especially if you start playing around with a lot of services outside of this serverless domain, and you may have stuff spinning outside of the serverless domain. It's a good practice just to be aware of what your budget is. Once we get that out of the way, and let me go back to my dashboard, you will need a IAM user with credentials that will allow us to communicate with the AWS service programmatically from your local development environment. And that's how the AWS service and SAM will push your code from your local environment into your AWS cloud. So let's take a look at what that setup process is. We're going to go to IAM and you can just type this in. I'm not going to star it if we ever come back to this, but let's just click IAM. Once you're on the IAM dashboard, you'll notice options to create IAM users, roles, policies, user groups. We'll be focusing on the user section. Here we'll be able to create your user and assign the required permissions. And finally, generate the credentials that we need to configure locally. So yes, let's go in and create our user. And already I have a few users in my account. This is a fairly older account. So let's go ahead and click create user. Here we can name this user with any name you desire. I'm going to label it Udemy Dev. There's also another option here to grant access to the management console. This is basically saying if you want the user to be able to log into AWS console to our dashboard, you can go ahead and check this and you'll be prompted with a few different ways to do it. I'll leave that for you to explore. For the sake of this, we're just going to keep it simple and in next. We also have the ability to add users to groups. If you plan on creating multiple users, groups are a good way to manage those users where you can assign a permission to the group and the users will be a part of that group. For the sake of this single user, we're going to attach the policy directly and we'll just go with administrator access for now. This should be all we need to create lambdas, API gateways, S3 buckets from the CLI. So let's go ahead and hit next, and we're going to create a user. So that's just the first step. Let me refresh this. Once our user is created, there's just one more step. We need to add the actual credential. So I'm going to go ahead and hit on my user. You do the same for whatever label you give that user name. So let's go there. We're going to go to security credentials. And you'll see there's a few different types of security credentials. What we are interested in is access key. So let's go ahead and create access key. And AWS provides some information about different types of keys and when you want to use those credentials. For the sake of what we need the CLI. Let's go ahead and hit command line. And we're going to click understand. And we can give it a tag. So we'll learn in it create access key. And that's it. Now this access key is something you should keep private and secure. As in if it gets in the wrong end, then they'll have the same permission that we just grant the user. And for the sake of this, after this video, I'll go ahead and delete this. So keep this page open. You will need this as we set up our credentials locally. What you can also do is hit download to download that as a CSV just for backup. So next thing, let's go ahead and open up terminal. Remember, we already installed the AWS CLI and we can check that. So let's do an AWS version. Go ahead and clear. We're going to actually create a profile. We're going to name the profile. And this is a flexible way if you work on multiple profiles and you want to switch between different accounts. So let's do AWS configure. And we're going to say pro dash dash profile. And we're going to give this profile a name. This can be anything. We're going to say serverless dev, or this could be just dev, right? Hit enter, and it's going to ask us for an access key, and that's why we kept these. So let's copy this and enter our credentials as well. Next is the default region. We can use this, leave this as none. However, if you want to take a look at your account, if you go to your global section, you'll see all the data centers and their location. So for mine, I'll use US East 1. And I'll leave the default format. This usually is JSON, so let's leave it. And that's it. So, but that's just the first part. Now we have our AWS profile, but how do we actually use the profile? So what we're going to do is issue a export AWS profile, and we pass in a profile name. As a matter of fact, let's just see how this worked before, right? We just set up our profile. So let's try to do something like AWS S3 LS. And here we're saying it's an invalid access key. So it's not detecting our credential yet, and that's because we haven't exported it. So let's go ahead and export AWS profile and the name of your profile. And let's try the same command again. And this should list all the buckets I have, which is quite a few. So you may ask, what if you forget the name of your profile? A nifty way to do that is AWS configure list. And you can actually see the different profile names that you have on your account. So for me, it's serverless dev. I can also list this config, maybe cat or vi, and these are all my profiles that I have. And so I'm able to switch between them. So let's go ahead and clear that since we have our AWS profile set up, and we can actually go ahead and start building our Lambda functions next.